it's Tash. Welcome to Tash's Library. Today's video is going to be my best books of 2024 so far. That is encompassing January to June 2024. And I'm going to pick 10 books. I've had a fabulous reading year so far, and I can only imagine that this list is going to change substantially by the time I get to the end of the year. Anyway, I'm going to go from 10 through to 1. Some of you may suspect what my number 1 is already if you have seen my mid-year freakout, but that's okay because you don't know the other 9. So without further ado, let's begin with number 10, and that is Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. So this is the sequel to Theft of Swords. The series follows Hadrian and Royce, who are best friends, ultimate bromance, and they are mercenaries, and it's just such a real epic fantasy. Now, it does initially read a bit rough. It is the first few books that Michael J. Sullivan released, but however, the story is just so captivating and I just could not stop reading it. And the second one did not disappoint, and the second one was definitely even better than the first, and I'm looking forward to continuing with the series and then going on to Aria Chronicles as well. Number 9 was The Wolf in the Whale. This was a surprise. I mean, I did expect to enjoy it, but not to the extent that I did. It was just, it was such a beautiful novel. So it follows Omat, who is an Inuit warrior. And Omat lives in a really hostile environment, as you can imagine, way up north, where it's very snowy, icy. Life is precarious. It is difficult to find food at times, and in fact, Omat's family is indeed struggling with food at the time. And Omat is then forced out into the wide world in order to try and secure the tribe's survival. In doing so, Omat comes across a Viking, and it's just fascinating. It's the interplay of Inuit mythology, Norse folklore. It is just fascinating. The exploration of colonization, clash of cultures, the trying to hold on to traditional lifestyles, the fight against, the passage of time. And it was just a heart-wrenching novel at times, but also an uplifting and beautiful one. It was just so beautifully crafted, wonderful to read, and gosh, it was just, I highly recommend it. Number 8 was Nettle and Bone. Now this I had expected to enjoy, but indeed I really enjoyed it, and it's a very fairy tale-esque story about a princess who feels drawn to try and save her sister, who's been married off to a violent prince. In order to do so, she has to find assistance from a witch who sets her improbable tasks, and she goes on the journey with a couple really cool animal companions, strange animal companions, but it's just a beautiful tale of sisterhood and magic and quest fantasy with a bit of humor, a bit of adventure. It's just beautiful. All right, I had to take a break due to neighbours' renovations, so let's hope it's a bit quieter now. But anyway, I was up to number 7, and that is The Book of Doors. This one was just a surprise. I had no idea what this book was about going in, and it was incredible. I read it in one day, and basically it follows this young woman who is given a book by a customer in a bookshop, and she finds that this book has magic, and it allows her to travel between places. And yes, the exploration of time, trauma, it's the friendships that are developed, it's just mind-boggling. I can't even quite put into words, but it just so beautifully constructed, so masterfully constructed, that this book was just kind of blew my mind, yet just kept me engrossed the entire time. The stakes are really high. The magic is super cool. The characters are really endearing. This is just one of the best books I read this year. Number 6 is The Wish Song of Shanur. This is the 3rd book in the original Shanur trilogy. And once again, this did not disappoint. This is a comfort zone for me. I absolutely love Shanur. It kind of gives me those Lord of the Rings vibes. I love the quest fantasy in it. I love the characters. I love the very clear delineation between good and evil. Just the friendships. It's just classic, traditional fantasy. And that just is such a comfort for me. It's a beautiful book. Number 5 is The Hexologists, and this was really, really cool. It follows a husband and wife team of hexologists who basically investigate different paranormal events and then use hexes to solve them. And yes, the characters are just so incredible. The relationship between the husband and wife is so cool. It's so charming, and it's so different from so many books that we get these days. There is a great dragon, a companion. The magic is wonderful. The whole world building is wonderful. The plot is very masterfully woven together. And I just want to do more. I just cannot wait to continue the series. Hopefully the 2nd book will be out really soon. Number 4 was Redemption in Indigo. And this was so beautiful. It is a Senegalese fairy tale, and that is just kind of, it's a retelling of it. And it just is a beautiful book about this woman who's left her husband because he's not very nice to her. And then there's no obvious abuse or anything. He's just lazy and just not really pulling his weight. And she just gets sick of being a slave to him. And therefore she leaves him. And this then triggers off a whole series of events. And there are some paranormal aspects to it, but it just this gorgeous tale of feminist power, but within the context of a traditional culture and the coming together of community, the development of new friendships, and just with all intermixed with a little bit of magic. And it was just a gorgeous, gorgeous book. Number 3 was The Will of the Many. Yes, I have jumped on this one. This was just so epic. It's based in a world where people can absorb will from others. And the more will you absorb, the higher up in the ranks you go. And that almost gives you sort of your superhuman powers. However, this is a hierarchy, which means that obviously the people who have will absorbed from them suffer for it, and they obviously lose strength and life, etc. But it's this young boy who basically gets adopted by a wealthy noble who sets him a task in a magic school, effectively. And so there is a bit of time within the magic school. There's a lot of political wheeling and dealing. It's effectively all the politics of ancient Rome with magic. And gosh, it just was relentless in its pace. I just couldn't stop reading it. The ending just like, oh my God, it was just so extreme. And I cannot wait for the 2nd book. Number 2 was The Tainted Cup. Just what can I say? Robert Jackson Bennett just delivers. I love fantasy with mystery elements, as I've said a couple times, I think, in my videos recently. And this is just no exception. It follows a detective team, a duo, which are effectively Sherlock Holmes and Watson. But the main detective is this very eccentric woman who often goes to crime scenes blindfolded, etc. Super eccentric, super smart, super good at her job. And then she is accompanied by this younger man who is an engraver. So basically it means he's had a modification to his body which enables him to remember everything photographically. So he just has to smell a particular scent and then he just captures the entire scene and will not forget that. So just perfect for a detective, right? What a great investigator. And all this is set in the backdrop of this world that is inhabited by a lot of weird plant life. And I love the plant life. It was just so unique. And then you also have this underlying threat of these leviathans coming in from the ocean and threatening land. It's just so beautiful. The murder mystery was wonderful. The characters were so great. And I cannot wait to continue this series as well. And number one just kind of snuck in June. And it's no surprise to anyone, it was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. And yes, I slept on this one. I took ages to get to it. I think I was a bit intimidated by the length of the books and the fact that I was facing at least 5 books. And I know there's eventually planned to be 10. So it was a big commitment. However, I read The Way of Kings in a few days. It was just so fast to read because the characters are just so addictive. I just kept wanting to know what was going to happen to them. And in The Way of Kings, we follow a few different POVs. So we have Kaladin, who is a slave. We have Shallan, who has traveled across the world in order to try and change her family's fortunes. We have Dalinar, who is the High Lord of a particular sort of province, and his son Adolin. We also have some minor characters interspersed here and there, and we do get their POVs as well. But this is such an epic world that's almost dystopian in nature. So it's very parched, it's not easy to live in, and then it faces these high storms that no one can really survive. Extreme storms where everyone just has to bunker down. And it's, yeah, just the magic in it is like no surprise. Sanderson is great at his magic systems, but the characters are just so deep and I just got so invested in them. And yes, just wonderful. And I'm currently reading Words of Radiance because I could not stop reading it. And I'm just hoping that I'll fly through this series because it is so much fun. But anyway, that is my top 10 for now. And who knows, it'll be really interesting to compare this at the end of the year and to see how many of these have retained their spot. I suspect there'd be a few at least that have, but who knows, because a good read is just the next book away, right? And you never know when it's going to turn up. Anyway, thanks for watching, and until I see you next time, take care.